Welcome back to our channel. Today, we are not discussing harmless tabloid gossip or the usual rumors filling the newspapers. Today, we are peeling back the layers of a seismic event that has just taken place behind the tightly guarded doors of Buckingham Palace. An event that completely reshapes the financial balance of power within the monarchy. Minutes ago, high-level insider sources confirmed a piece of earth-shattering news. King Charles III has just placed his signature on a top-secret legal document referred to by palace observers as the Balmoral Decree. This is not a routine administrative adjustment. This is a cold, calculated directive designed to execute a singular, ruthless objective: to completely sever Meghan Markle from any rights to inherit the personal assets of the king. Forget the narratives about reconciliation or awkward birthday phone calls. The reality unfolding is far more brutal. While the media is still speculating about Prince Harry's potential return, in London, a financial execution has been officially triggered. The incident took place late last night. There was no fanfare, no press release, only unmarked black Range Rovers with tinted windows quietly pulling into the rear entrance of Clarence House, shielding their passengers from the prying eyes of the city. The individuals stepping out were not tea guests. They were Sir Michael Stevens, the keeper of the Privy Purse, Prince William, and Princess Anne. The presence of this power trio at an emergency late-night summit signals only one thing: the survival of the royal wealth is under threat, and they needed to act immediately. According to leaked reports from the palace's financial bunker, King Charles did not sign this document as a grieving father. He signed it as a CEO, protecting his billion-dollar corporation from what the institution now classifies as a toxic asset. This document is designed as an impenetrable legal firewall. It explicitly states that the king's private assets, including private estates, art collections, and investment portfolios, worth hundreds of millions of pounds, will be transferred under a new, rigid trust mechanism. This mechanism contains a specific clause, written in sharp, unforgiving legal language, to exclude anyone who is not a working royal from the beneficiary list. But the crux of the matter lies here. Meghan Markle's name is reportedly listed specifically in the Commercial Risk Annex. What does this mean? It means the royal family no longer views her as a daughter-in-law or a relative. In the eyes of the cold bureaucracy in London, she is now designated as a financial security threat. Why did King Charles act so decisively at this moment? Why now? The answer lies in the intelligence coming out of Montecito. Royal auditors have detected alarming signs regarding the Sussexes' financial liquidity, and the palace fears the king's will could become the next target for commercial exploitation. This decree is a preemptive strike. It sends a ruthless message across the Atlantic to California. The cash flow has been severed. The game is over. But this is just the beginning of the nightmare for the Sussexes. What transpired inside that meeting room that night was far more dramatic than a simple signature. What did Prince William say to convince his father to make this heartbreaking decision? And what is the true panic reaction from Montecito as this news leaks through secret channels? Inside the dimly lit oak room, the atmosphere was frigid, heavy with the weight of centuries of tradition clashing with modern betrayal. King Charles sat at the head of the table, looking less like a monarch and more like a man burdened by the disintegration of his own bloodline. Opposite him sat Prince William, the Prince of Wales, who arrived not with sentimental pleas or emotional arguments, but with a black leather briefcase. This briefcase contained what palace insiders are now referring to as the parasite dossier. This was not a collection of family photos or nostalgic memories. It was a forensic accounting report, meticulously compiled by intelligence analysts and top-tier financial auditors over the last 18 months. William didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply slid the heavy dossier across the polished mahogany table towards his father. "We are not dealing with family anymore, Pa," William reportedly stated, his voice devoid of emotion, cutting through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "We are dealing with a hostile corporate entity that is actively betting against our survival." The dossier revealed a terrifying truth that shattered any remaining hope Charles held for reconciliation. It mapped out a projection of the Sussexes' future earnings, and the data was damning. Every single projected revenue stream for the couple was tethered to the death of the king or the collapse of the monarchy. The report highlighted a disturbing strategy allegedly drafted by Meghan's Hollywood team, a contingency plan designed to monetize the inevitable grief and transition of power when Charles eventually passes. Princess Anne, who had remained silent until this moment, leaned forward. Known as the enforcer of the firm, she didn't mince words. Her eyes were fixed on her brother. "She is betting on your mortality, Charles," Anne said, her words landing with the force of a gavel. "If you leave her a single penny in your personal will, you are not just being generous. You are funding the very arsenal that will be used to destroy William's reign." The revelation was the turning point. For months, Charles had wavered, holding on to the desperate hope of reconciliation with his darling boy. But the cold, hard data presented by William destroyed that illusion. The dossier showed that the Sussexes' lifestyle in Montecito, the private jets, the presidential-level security detail, the PR firms required a cash burn rate of millions of dollars per year. Without a future royal inheritance, their business model is mathematically insolvent. It was at this precise moment that the terms of the Balmoral Decree were finalized. It wasn't just about cutting them off. It was a strategic necessity. William argued that allowing Meghan access to the king's private fortune would be akin to handing a loaded gun to someone who has already pulled the trigger. But the most shocking part of the meeting was yet to come. Sir Michael Stevens, the keeper of the Privy Purse, opened the second section of the file. It contained evidence that would seal the door forever proof of back-channel communications that the palace considered an absolute betrayal of trust. As the king's pen hovered over the decree, he looked at his heir, then at his sister. The decision he was about to make would echo through history. He wasn't just disinheriting a daughter-in-law, he was dismantling the safety net of his second son. The order was given: complete asset quarantine. Back in California, the silence from London was deafening. But the Sussexes' financial team had likely already sensed the tremors. The credit lines were drying up. The Bank of Dad was not just closed, it was being demolished foundation by foundation. 5,000 miles away, in the exclusive gated enclave of Montecito, the sun was rising over the Riven Rock estate. But the atmosphere inside the Sussex mansion was reportedly anything but bright. According to sources close to the couple's former staff, the news of the Balmoral Decree did not arrive via a courteous phone call from King Charles to his son. It arrived via a cold, formal notification from a London-based legal firm to the Sussexes' business managers in Los Angeles. This was the Street James Protocol in action. Total communication blackout. No emotion, just procedure. The reaction in Montecito was described by one insider as absolute strategic panic. For years, Meghan Markle has been portrayed by her critics as playing a long game. Palace analysts believe this long game relied heavily on one crucial assumption: that no matter how much mud they threw at the institution, the biological link between Harry and the king would eventually secure them a payout. They banked on the idea that Charles, the soft-hearted father, would never let his grandchildren's parents face financial ruin. The Balmoral Decree shattered that assumption instantly. This is where the Montecito meltdown begins. We need to understand that for Meghan, this isn't just about losing an inheritance. It is about the destruction of her Plan B. Financial experts observing the Sussex brand have long noted that their commercial value is directly tied to their proximity to the crown. Without the promise of future access, future secrets, or future reconciliation, their market value plummets. Inside the mansion, the reality of their lifestyle inflation began to set in. The couple is reportedly sitting on a mountain of overhead costs that their current dwindling media deals cannot sustain for another 5 years. The mortgage, the private security, the legal teams, the PR retainers, it all costs millions annually. The secret Plan B that Meghan was allegedly holding in reserve was a reconciliation arc. The plan was simple. After the anger of Spare and the Netflix series died down, they would pivot back to being half-in royals, leveraging the king's forgiveness to boost their brand prestige in America. They needed the royal seal of approval to remain relevant in Hollywood A-list circles. By signing the decree, King Charles didn't just cut them out of the will, he burned the bridge they were planning to retreat across. He effectively told the world, These two are no longer associated with the business of the monarchy. Panic reportedly turned into a frantic strategy session. Sources suggest Meghan's team is now scrambling to find a new narrative. The victim card has been played out. The reconciliation card has just been revoked by the king. What is left? The fear gripping Montecito is that they are now trapped in a golden cage. They have the title, they have the house, but they have lost the connection to the power source that pays for it all. And as the reality of the decree sank in, Prince Harry was reportedly left staring at a terrifying truth. He is alone in America, with a wife who demands a palace lifestyle and a father who has finally closed the vault. But if you think the Sussexes will go down quietly, you are mistaken. A wounded animal is the most dangerous, and according to leaks from their camp, they are preparing to launch a counterattack, a desperate move to regain leverage before the world finds out they are financially cut off. If the Balmoral Decree was the calculated strike from London, what followed from California was the desperate, asymmetrical counterattack. In the world of high-stakes royal warfare, when you lose the financial high ground, you immediately pivot to the moral low ground. You weaponize vulnerability. Less than 24 hours after the legal notice regarding the asset quarantine arrived in Montecito, a very specific narrative began to trickle out through friendly media channels in the United States. This was not a coincidence, it was a deployment. Headlines suddenly shifted. We began to see exclusive sources telling glossy American magazines that Prince Harry was at his breaking point. The narrative was carefully constructed. It wasn't about money, it was about health. The leaks painted a picture of a prince under unbearable stress, suffering from extreme exhaustion, and allegedly battling the physical toll of his family's cruelty. This is a classic PR deflection tactic known in crisis management as the sympathy smokescreen. By pivoting to a health crisis narrative, Meghan's team is attempting to reframe the battlefield. They want to shift the public discourse away from the fact that they have been financially excommunicated due to poor business decisions and instead frame King Charles as a cold-hearted father who is pushing his fragile son to the brink of a medical emergency for the sake of money. It is a cynical, yet effective, move. It forces the palace into a defensive position. How can the king maintain a hardline financial blockade if his son is publicly portrayed as being on the verge of a breakdown? It is emotional blackmail, repackaged as medical concern. Analysts point out the timing is suspicious. There was no mention of health issues when they were launching websites or accepting awards. This crisis only materialized the moment the credit lines were cut. However, the palace was ready for this. Inside the strategy rooms at Buckingham Palace, this tactic is referred to as weaponized empathy. Sir Michael Stevens and Prince William had anticipated that the Sussexes would play the victim card one last time. But this time, the health crisis narrative has a fatal flaw. The British public, and increasingly the American public, are suffering from compassion fatigue regarding the Sussexes. The cry of wolf has been heard too many times. Furthermore, the sheer brutality of using health as a bargaining chip to unlock a trust fund has exposed the desperation behind the scenes in Montecito. The palace's intelligence suggests that this health narrative is being used to mask the true panic, the liquidity crisis. They are trying to guilt-trip the king into releasing funds under the guise of medical support or stress alleviation. But King Charles is no longer making decisions alone, and the response from London to these new leaks was not the warm concern of a parent, but the icy silence of an institution that refuses to be held hostage by emotional manipulation. In fact, William is reportedly preparing a dossier that counters these health claims with evidence of their recent, lavish, jet-setting lifestyle, proving that the only thing breaking in Montecito is their bank account. As the health narrative fails to gain the traction they hoped for, the Sussexes are about to realize they have played their second-to-last card, and the palace is about to deploy a new weapon of its own, one that involves the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. While the tabloids were distracted by the health crisis leaks, a far more dangerous game was being played behind the scenes, a game involving international tax law and the most feared government agency in the United States, the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. This brings us to the fifth phase of the Street James strategy, known inside the palace as the domicile trap. For years, Prince Harry has existed in a gray area of immigration and taxation. Is he a diplomat? Is he a private citizen? Is he a prince of the realm on official business? This ambiguity was his shield. It allowed him to live in California while potentially avoiding the full weight of the U.S. tax system on his worldwide assets and inherited wealth. But the Balmoral Decree did more than just cut him out of the will. It formally redefined his status. Sources indicate that palace lawyers have quietly updated Prince Harry's status with the relevant UK authorities, clarifying that he is no longer domiciled in the United Kingdom for the purposes of royal duty. This seemingly bureaucratic adjustment acts as a tripwire. If he is not a working royal, and he is living permanently in Montecito, he is subject to the full scrutiny of the U.S. tax regime. And here is the tax trap that King Charles has allowed to spring shut. By cutting off the official funding, the king has removed the diplomatic shield. The panic in Montecito is now twofold. First, there is the lack of incoming cash. Second, and perhaps more terrifying for Meghan, is the threat of an audit. Intelligence suggests that the Sussexes' financial structure is a complex web of LLCs registered in Delaware aimed at shielding their earnings and donations. Until now, they have operated with relative impunity, protected by the aura of the British monarchy. No tax inspector wants to cause a diplomatic incident by auditing the king's son, but the silence from Buckingham Palace has signaled to Washington that the diplomatic protection is gone. A palace insider reportedly noted, Al Capone wasn't brought down by the police for his crimes. He was brought down by the taxman for his ledger. The king doesn't need to fight Harry. He just needs to let the IRS do their job. The implications are catastrophic. If the IRS looks into Harry's finances, they won't just look at his income. They will look at gifts. Any money Charles gave him in the past, or any money he might give him in the future, could be subject to punitive taxation. This effectively neutralizes any back-channel attempts by Harry to beg for money. Even if Charles wanted to send £1 million to help his son, almost half of it would be swallowed by the American government. Meghan, who is known to be extremely controlling of their brand's image, is reportedly terrified of what a public audit would reveal. How much of the charity money went to administrative costs? How much did they really get paid for spare? The transparency required by the U.S. tax system is the enemy of the Sussex brand, which relies on mystery and perceived billionaire status. By simply clarifying a legal definition, King Charles has surrounded the Montecito mansion not with soldiers, but with auditors. He has turned the American legal system, the very system Harry and Meghan tried to use against the press, into a weapon against them. As the realization hits that their financial records could be cracked open, the Sussexes are left with only one desperate option to generate quick cash. They have to sell something, but with no new content, no royal secrets left to spill, and no inheritance coming, what do they have left to sell? The answer brings us to the next, most humiliating phase of their downfall, the liquidation of the royal brand. With the IRS threat looming on one side and the king's financial blockade on the other, the atmosphere in Montecito has shifted from panic to desperation. We are now witnessing the beginning of what palace analysts are calling the Great Royal Fire Sale. When a luxury brand faces bankruptcy, it doesn't just close its doors, it liquidates its stock. It sells everything at a discount to generate quick cash. The Sussexes are no different, except their stock is the prestige of a 1,000-year-old monarchy. According to industry insiders in Hollywood, the couple's agents have been quietly instructed to lower their standards for engagement. The era of waiting for Obama-level projects is over. The mandate is now cash on delivery. This explains the sudden, confusing shift in their branding. We are seeing a scramble to monetize the only asset they have left, the titles. But because the high-end luxury brands like Dior or Chanel have reportedly distanced themselves, fearing the toxic label associated with the couple, Harry and Meghan are being forced to move down the value chain. Market analysts call this brand dilution. Leaks suggest that Meghan is considering merchandising deals that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. We are talking about potential partnerships with wellness apps, diet supplements, or even home shopping-style product lines. Imagine the Duchess of Sussex not shaking hands with diplomats, but peddling coffee blends or yoga mats on Instagram. For King Charles, watching this from London is reportedly painful, but it also serves as a grim validation of the Balmoral Decree. He knew this would happen. He knew that once the official funding stopped, the merchandising of the monarchy would begin. But the most degrading aspect of this fire sale is the rumored pay-to-play scheme. Reports are circulating that the couple's appearance fees have dropped significantly, but they are increasing the volume of their availability. They are effectively becoming rent-a-royals. Need a prince to cut a ribbon at a tech startup in San Francisco? For the right price, he might be there. Need a duchess to give a keynote speech at a mid-tier marketing conference? The check clears the schedule. This commoditization of the royal status is the ultimate nightmare for the institution. Queen Elizabeth II famously said, "I have to be seen to be believed." Harry and Meghan are twisting this into, "We have to be paid to be seen." However, this strategy has a fatal economic flaw, the law of diminishing returns. The more they sell their presence, the less valuable it becomes. A prince is special because he is rare. A prince who appears at every opening of an envelope is just a celebrity, and celebrities have a shelf life. As they burn through the prestige of their titles to pay for their mansion's overhead, they are entering a dangerous spiral. They are selling off the family silver to pay the electric bill. And once the silver is gone, what is left? The palace is watching this liquidation with a mixture of sadness and resolve. But they are also preparing for the next inevitable step. When the commercial deals dry up and the fire sale yields no more cash, the Sussexes will have to resort to the one thing that always sells, even when everything else fails: nuclear-level secrets. When the fire sale of their brand failed to generate the necessary liquidity, the strategy in Montecito shifted from commercial desperation to something far more sinister. We have now arrived at the phase that palace aides have feared for years: the nuclear option. Intelligence reaching London suggests that Meghan Markle is preparing to deploy her weapon of last resort, the missing Kensington diaries. You may recall a subtle yet chilling threat Meghan made during her interview with The Cut magazine. She looked at the journalist and said, "I never signed anything that restricts me from talking." She then mentioned finding her old journals at Frogmore Cottage. At the time, it seemed like a throwaway comment. Today, in the wake of the Balmoral Decree, it is being interpreted as a direct extortion attempt. This tactic is known in legal circles as greymail. It is a form of leverage where one party threatens to reveal damaging state or personal secrets unless a settlement is reached. The narrative being crafted in California is that these diaries contain the unfiltered truth about her time in the monarchy, allegations of racism, coldness, and neglect that didn't make it into the Netflix series or Spare because they were deemed too incendiary at the time. Sources suggest that the Sussex team is currently shopping a memoir Part 2 concept to publishers, solely to panic King Charles into reopening the checkbook. The message is clear: restore the funding, or we burn the house down. However, the Sussexes have made a fatal miscalculation regarding the new king. Charles is not Queen Elizabeth II. The late Queen's strategy was never complain, never explain, which often meant enduring attacks in silence. King Charles, backed by the ruthless efficiency of Prince William, has adopted a different doctrine: mutually assured destruction. The palace has anticipated the diary threat. In fact, the Balmoral Decree reportedly contains a poison pill clause. This clause stipulates that any unauthorized publication of private family conversations or state secrets will not only result in total financial excommunication, but will also trigger immediate legal action under the Official Secrets Act. This is the nuclear deterrent. If Meghan publishes those diaries, she isn't just fighting a family dispute. She could be facing a lawsuit from the British Crown for breaching state confidentiality. Moreover, the palace has their own files. For years, there have been suppressed reports regarding the allegations of bullying against staff by the Duchess. The famous bullying report, which was buried to protect family unity, could be unearthed. William is reportedly ready to declassify these findings if the Sussexes launch another attack. The logic is cold and hard. If you want to talk about truth, let's put everything on the table, including the way you treated your staff. The realization of this counter-threat has stalled the Montecito offensive. They are holding a grenade, but they have realized that pulling the pin might blow them up as well. They are stuck in a stalemate. No money is coming in, and their biggest weapon is too dangerous to use. So, trapped in a corner, with the walls closing in, the Sussexes are about to make a clumsy, public mistake. They are about to try and bypass the king and appeal directly to the only entity they think still loves them, the public. But they are about to find out that the public mood has shifted drastically. Cornered by the financial blockade and neutralized by the palace's threat of legal retaliation, the Sussexes made one final, fatal miscalculation. They decided to bypass the institution entirely and appeal directly to the only court they believed they still controlled, the court of public opinion. This brings us to Part 8, the public humiliation of the fake royal tour. Palace insiders describe this strategy as diplomatic cosplay. Denied official state visits, the Sussexes organized their own quasi-royal tour to a Commonwealth nation. The goal was transparent, to generate imagery that looked regal enough to convince Netflix and potential investors that they still held global influence. They wanted the motorcades, the red carpets, and the cheering crowds to prove that they were bigger than the monarchy itself. But what unfolded was described by a senior diplomat in London as a hollow pantomime. Without the logistical machinery of the British Foreign Office, the tour descended into awkward chaos. There were no meetings with heads of state, only photo ops with local dignitaries who seemed confused by the couple's status. There was no God Save the King, only the clicking of Netflix cameras capturing their every move. Crucially, King Charles did not intervene. He didn't strip their titles or issue a statement condemning the trip. He simply followed the maxim of Napoleon: never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. The palace allowed the tour to proceed because they knew something the Sussexes did not. The magic of a royal tour comes from what the royal represents, the nation, not who they are as individuals. Without the crown behind them, Harry and Meghan were just two celebrities in expensive suits visiting a foreign country. The backlash was swift and brutal. Instead of adoration, the global press ridiculed the event. They called it the reality show tour. Social media was flooded not with praise, but with questions. Who is paying for this? Why are they acting like heads of state? Is this just for the next documentary? The Balmoral Decree had already stripped them of financial legitimacy. This tour stripped them of their dignity. The most damaging moment came when the costs were analyzed. Reports surfaced that the security bill for this private trip was astronomical, and it was being footed by obscure charities or private donors. The narrative shifted from global philanthropists to grifters on vacation. Inside Buckingham Palace, the mood was one of quiet vindication. Prince William reportedly viewed the footage and remarked that the mystique is gone. The curtain had been pulled back. The world saw that without the castle, the guards, and the history, the Sussex brand is empty calories, lots of packaging, zero nutritional value. This public humiliation hit Meghan the hardest. She had banked on her charisma being enough to carry the brand. But the fake royal tour proved that charisma without authority looks like arrogance. As they flew back to California, leaving behind a trail of awkward headlines and no new signed contracts, the atmosphere on their private jet was reportedly icy. The health crisis failed, the nuclear threat was checked. And now, the public appeal had backfired. They returned to Montecito not as triumphant conquerors, but as a couple realizing the terrifying truth. The world is moving on. And as the external pressure mounts, the internal cracks within the marriage are beginning to widen into chasms. This leads us to the penultimate phase of the crisis. When the money is gone and the fame turns to mockery, who do you blame? You blame each other. When the fake royal tour collapsed and the public ridicule reached a fever pitch, the crisis in Montecito crossed the final threshold. It moved from a professional disaster to a personal catastrophe. We are now entering Part 9, The internal collapse. History and statistics tells us that the number one cause of divorce is financial stress. When you combine financial panic with public humiliation and global isolation, you create a toxic pressure cooker that no marriage, no matter how fairy tale it claims to be, can survive. According to sources close to the couple's shrinking circle of friends, the Balmoral Decree has acted as a wedge, driving them into what insiders are calling operational separation. The narrative of Harry and Meghan against the world only works when you are winning. When you are losing, it becomes Harry versus Meghan. Reports are filtering out that the couple is living increasingly separate lives. Prince Harry has reportedly been spending nights away from the Riven Rock estate, seeking refuge in exclusive hotels in Los Angeles or staying at the San Vicente bungalows, a place known for its absolute privacy and no-phone policy. He is described as isolated, morose, and deeply regretting the bridges he burned. Meghan, on the other hand, is reportedly in crisis management mode. But this time, she is managing her brand, not theirs. We are seeing a strategic distancing. She is attending events alone. She is being photographed without her engagement ring. In the language of Hollywood PR, this is soft decoupling. The blame game inside the mansion is reportedly explosive. Sources suggest Harry blames Meghan's aggressive strategy for alienating his family and cutting off the lifeline. He feels he gave up his country, his military titles, and his friends for a billion-dollar brand that is now worthless. Conversely, Meghan reportedly blames Harry for his inability to close the deal with his father. To her, Harry's only job was to maintain the connection to the royal vault. By failing to stop the Balmoral Decree, he has failed in his primary function within their business partnership. And make no mistake, Palace analysts have always viewed this marriage as a joint venture. When a business venture becomes insolvent, the partners don't just argue, they dissolve the partnership. The most chilling whisper coming from California is that inquiries have been made to high-profile divorce attorneys, not for an immediate filing, but for asset protection. But here lies the irony. Thanks to King Charles's decree, there are no royal assets left to protect. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow has vanished. If they divorce now, it will be a war of the roses played out on American soil. And the palace is watching this internal collapse with a grim sense of inevitability. They know that a divorced Prince Harry is a tragedy, but a married Prince Harry in debt is a liability. As the walls of the Montecito mansion close in, and the silence between the couple grows louder than the paparazzi helicopters, we approach the final act of this tragedy. What happens when the prince realizes he has nothing left to lose? He attempts to go home, but is the door still open? Or has the Balmoral Decree locked it forever? We have arrived at the end of the road. After the financial execution, the failed counterattacks, the public humiliation, and the internal collapse, we are left with one final, haunting question. Is there a way back? This brings us to the conclusion, the king's last condition. According to deep palace sources, in the wake of the Balmoral Decree, a discreet back-channel communication was finally opened. It was not a negotiation. It was the presentation of what insiders are calling the terms of surrender. King Charles III, despite the ruthless financial measures taken to protect the crown, remains a father. The decree cuts off the Sussex brand, and it cuts off Meghan Markle, but it reportedly leaves a tiny, singular loophole for Prince Harry. But the cost of entry is total capitulation. Palace aides have likened this offer to a monastic retreat. The conditions are reportedly stark. Total asset separation. Harry can return to the UK, but he must return as an individual, not as a business partner. There will be no half in, half out. The NDA of the century. Before he sets foot on royal grounds, he must sign a non-disclosure agreement so watertight that even whispering a family secret would result in immediate legal destruction. The grace and favor exile. He would be provided with a safe residence, likely small and away from London, but he would have zero public role, no balconies, no uniforms, no patronages. Just a quiet life in the English countryside, funded by a modest allowance that is strictly monitored to ensure not a penny flows back to California to fund a Hollywood lifestyle. But the unwritten condition, the elephant in the room, is the most painful. While the palace cannot legally force a divorce, the financial structure of this offer makes it impossible to sustain a marriage to someone with Meghan's ambitions. The king is effectively saying, "You can have your family back, or you can have your wife's ambitions. You cannot have both." As the sun sets over Buckingham Palace, the mood is not one of victory, but of tragedy. King Charles has secured the future of the monarchy. He has protected the vault. He has neutralized the threat. But he has done so by accepting that he may never truly get his son back, at least, not the son he once knew. In Montecito, the realization is setting in. The $100 million debt isn't just about money. It is the cost of freedom without responsibility. It is the price of betraying the very institution that gave you your name. Harry is now standing at the crossroads. Behind him is the wreckage of a failed American dream and a mountain of debt. Ahead of him is a cold, lonely path back to a family that views him as a liability. The Balmoral Decree is signed. The will is sealed. The checkbook is closed. The king has made his move. Now, the world waits to see if the prodigal son will finally accept that the only way home is to walk through the door alone. Thank you for watching this deep dive analysis. If you believe the king made the right decision to protect the crown, hit the like button. If you think the punishment is too harsh, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from behind the palace walls.